Hello and welcome to the Pascack Clutch Sports Podcast. We are here with Mad Dog Matt, Sean Barry, Alex McKay, and myself, Sam Koppelman. We have three guest stars here with us today, Mr. Camonto, Mr. Kirkby, and Michael McKay, and to Matt with the school sports.
Thank you, Sam. Let's make this quick because we want to focus on our NHL coverage with our three special guests. We've got three big things to talk about, two of which in Hills lacrosse. We'll start with the boys lacrosse team who won their first ever championship a few weeks back with a 6-5 thrilling win over Fairlawn that won them the NJILL Cullen Division title. And you can see that game right here on the PH Athletics YouTube channel if you're watching on YouTube. We also want to celebrate one of our girls lacrosse players, one of our best girls lacrosse players this season. Izzy Benedict scored her 100th career point a few weeks ago, and about 2 weeks ago she scored her 100th career goal for the Broncos, so congratulations to Izzy Benedict. And of course it is state playoff time. We'll focus on baseball because they made it to the second round with a big 7-0 win over Newton. They play Westwood tomorrow, which is Thursday, May 25th after school, right here at Pascack Hills. So with that, let's go over to the NHL because that is our big focus with our three special guests, Michael, Mr. Kirkby, and Mr. Camonto. And first off, I want to start off with you, Mr. Kirkby, and Mr. Camonto, and Michael. How'd you guys get into hockey, and what's your favorite team?
I actually got into it. My dad was the 8th season ticket holder for the New Jersey Devils when they came here about 40 years ago, when they were the old Colorado Rockies. He is now the longest standing Devils season ticket holder. So I grew up going to those games from the time I was like 4 years old. So I've kind of been brainwashed to be a Devils fan, but I am a Devils fan.
That's actually really cool.
So yeah, it's kind of cool. He gets some cool perks with things. They do a nice job taking care of
I would hope so.
of the guys that stay with him all these years.
You've had season tickets since 1982. I would hope you get a lot of perks with that.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
So you're definitely a
I'm a
Devils
Devils
fan.
fan, yeah.
Mr. Kamano?
I'm a Rangers fan.
Yes.
My father was born a Rangers fan and started going to the games in the 60s. And when he was in his 20s, he missed the Jockerman game, which if you're a Ranger fan, Jockerman had come back as a Detroit Red Wing, and they were chanting his name. And then later that season, he missed the Stemkowski triple overtime goal, which is the second most famous goal in Rangers history. And he said to his friends that night, he said, "We got to get season seats." So that was in 1978, and that was the first season that my family had our seats, and we've had them ever since. So I've been going to the Garden. I think my first game was in '92, and Messier scored a hat trick that day. It was a day game. So that's always the famous story from my first game. So it's been a lifelong love for me.
That's a very good introduction to the sport of hockey. I
Yeah,
guess.
and it
Mark
happened.
Messier, the Rangers star with a hat trick, and then of course 2 years later he goes on to win the Stanley Cup.
And happened to be against the Devils as well, which
Yes.
was pretty wild. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a big thing. Now, Michael, you're obviously a bit different from our two teacher guests here, and we know you kind of personally. You're a Devils fan, and I'm sure you and Alex both have the same story as to how you got into the sport.
Yeah. Well, my first game, it's not as memorable because sadly they lost. But my most recent game I was at the Rock, I played for the school marching band, and the Devils also won that game.
And most of us were there. That was the
Yeah.
Kraken game. They won
Yeah.
that 4-0 or 4-1.
3-1.
3-1. Okay.
Yeah.
That was a very good game to go to.
Yeah.
It was a very good activation that the school did with the marching band
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
Nice cheap tickets that we got,
Yeah.
or as cheap as you're going to get them, I guess.
Hope to be there
this
again
time.
next year.
Oh yeah.
We also got a question to ask you guys. Who do you guys think the league's best player is? I mean, McDavid obviously probably the easy answer, but you guys got Draisaitl maybe or somebody else up there?
I think this is one area where a Devils fan can certainly agree with a Rangers fan, and that's that Connor McDavid is the best player in the league. I think it's difficult for especially young people to understand what we saw this year. Connor McDavid had 153 points, and we have not seen anything like that since Mario Lemieux in 1996, who had 161 points. So no matter if you are 15 years old, 25 years old, 35 or 45, we have not seen this in a long, long time. And to give you an idea of the dominance, especially on the power play, Connor McDavid had 71 power play points this year, and the next best team had 72. So he almost outscored an entire team, the second best team on the power play. And Mr. Kirkby, you most likely, you remember that Mario Lemieux season.
Yep.
Have you seen anything like this?
No, what he's been able to do, and I think I think Draisaitl obviously is very, very talented. I think if you take Draisaitl off that team, there's no comparison as to what would happen if you take McDavid off that team. McDavid he's a one-man highlight reel.
Yeah.
The way he skates, the way he's able to, just basically take over games. I think if you put Draisaitl on another team that's an average team, he's still a very good player. He's probably a top 5 fantasy guy. I think if you put McDavid on another team, he's still the top fantasy guy in the league, no matter what. So.
And a young guy, one of the best players, the best player in the league, playing for Edmonton. I guess you have to say Wayne Gretzky. The comparison, no other choice.
There is no.
I mean,
comparison.
Wayne Gretzky, Mario Lemieux are the only two guys that you can compare him to, and
That's fair.
that says incredible things about McDavid at this point in his career, and he still has a long way to go.
It's just that they need a cup.
They need a cup.
He needs a cup
He needs a cup,
GOAT.
whether it is in Edmonton or whether it is somewhere else. I'm sure he wants it to be in Edmonton, but he wants that cup more.
He
than
needs a
anything.
cup to reach GOAT status.
Yes.
In my
Yeah.
opinion.
You can always come to the Devils.
I don't know if anybody's going to do
I don't think we're going to win a cup, my friend. Until
He's on pace to be better than Gretzky. If you look at it, he's on pace.
Oh, he's on pace. That doesn't mean an injury can derail.
Yeah.
Gretzky did things that.
Yeah, as we said, the comparison is to the people that he's with. There were multiple 100-point scorers this year. Wayne Gretzky was outscoring people by 100 points.
Yeah.
So it
was just a different time, though, if you really look at it.
It's a very different time, I feel like.
Yeah.
Back in the 80s and the 90s when Gretzky played, goaltending isn't at the status that it is now, I feel like. You had games consistently 6-7 goals per game. Now you're lucky to get 4 or 5 if it's a blowout, I feel.
And I'm pretty sure cages were also a little bit smaller then, too.
Yeah.
So
that's a great point, Mad Dog. But it's all about looking at it through the lens of history. And again, why wasn't everyone scoring 200 points back then?
Yeah.
When Babe Ruth was hitting 60 home runs, why wasn't everyone's hitting 60 home runs?
There's the counterpoint to it.
And Gretzky's domination has only been seen by it has not been seen like that except for what you look at in terms of Bobby Hull had some great seasons, and of course Gordie Howe, Mario Lemieux, but nothing compared to the domination.
He had more assists than anybody else at points, right?
Yeah.
And then he still had like 70 goals.
Yeah.
It's like,
And a crazy stat is if you look at the most points by a brother duo in league history, and it's the Gretzky's. 800 and something, 890, and his brother had like 8. Something like that.
It's that one thing that always goes around with Kobe Bryant and Kwame Brown scoring 63 points one night. Kobe Bryant scored 62, and Kwame Brown scored 1.
yeah.
That's it. Kwame Brown. Wow, that's a name.
Also, if you think about it, players were also a lot slower then because the skates were a lot thicker, a lot heavier. There's a lot more technology now that makes players a lot better than they are today.
That's the problem in every sport, though. You compare. You have to take into account the time period when you compare players, because obviously every sport is going to evolve at one point.
Yeah.
As Mr. Kamanto, you are a Formula One fan. I'm a Formula One fan. To make a mention of this, Formula One constantly evolving the cars. Wings, bigger engines, better things. It always evolves, and that's why it's so hard in Formula One and in every sport to determine who is the best player ever. But it's a better conversation, I feel like, to determine the best player of an era.
Yes, definitely.
The best player ever.
Where were you when you retired? That's the big question.
Yeah.
So, anyways, with the league's best player, let's go on to some first and second round series. Of course, we're in the conference finals right now in the National Hockey League. But we really want to talk about, I guess, the big series that happened a few weeks back. Actually, it's probably about a month ago now in this New York, New Jersey area, which is the Rangers-Devils series, a 7-game series. Pretty even.
Yeah.
I would say. Of course, it has to be even if it goes to 7 games.
Yeah.
The Rangers had their big moments, of course, in games 1 and 2 at the Rock,
And then they
with-
started to fall apart.
and then they started to fall apart in 3, 4, and,
And
I
then they
believe
kind of
5,
just
right?
gave. Yeah, they kind of
7.
gave up.
It was awful.
They pretty much,
Gave
I
up.
feel like, gave up in that
I mean,
series.
you could tell once they were losing,
Mhm.
like once the Devils had scored the first goal, and
Yeah.
It was already
seven,
over.
They'd been like, "Oh, I guess our season's over."
The Devils were the faster team. I guess you
Yeah.
could say they were the
Way
better
younger.
team.
It's not
They
even
were the
that.
younger team, and
pretty much everyone on our team.
once they got those playoff jitters out of the way,
Yeah.
those first
First
2
two games.
games in the playoffs, of course, being at home kind of helped with that instead of having a opposing crowd heckle you every mistake you make.
Yeah.
But once they got those first 2 games out of the way, those jitters,
Yeah.
then it started to click for them. And of course, the big thing with that is Akira Schmid getting in goal for games
Having
3, 4,
like
and 5.
150 saves
and
in 3
6.
games.
Two
Yeah.
And
I-
he had,
Yeah,
he had
2 shutouts.
2 shutouts in the series. And do you put Schmidt in the net now going forward, and do you get rid of Vanacek?
I think you should keep both.
I think
I
with
think-
the way I'll take it the way that hockey's become, it's kind of like in the NFL where you very rarely see no besides like a Derrick Henry, those guys are getting 350 carries a year. Vasilevsky, is one of the few guys who might get 60 starts. You need 2 quality goalies.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think
definitely.
unfortunately the guy is Blackwood's gone. I mean,
Yeah.
Yeah.
he was supposed to be their hype a couple of years ago. But
He's either free agency or down to the AHL.
Yeah.
There's
Yeah.
nothing else that you can do with him because you have to put Schmidt on the roster after what he did.
he was phenomenal all year in minimal opportunities, but
Some of the saves he had.
yeah, he's
Yeah.
just
He only had like 18 games that he actually had
Yeah.
any playing time.
Mhm.
I think I'm gonna counter the point made by the Devils fans here that if you look at Schmid's bulk of work in the Rangers series, he faced fewer high danger scoring chances than any other goalie at that point. I think it speaks more to the Devils' ability to choke the Rangers, where in games 3 through 7, once they found their footing in the series, the Devils almost out-attempted the Rangers 2-1. It was the most domination that we've seen in the playoffs thus far. And Schmidt goes on to the Carolina series and gives up more goals on normal chances than any goalie had given up in the playoffs at that point. So I think he'd make a great backup goalie, but and I posed this question to the Devils fans. When you look at the names on the market, Frederik Andersen, Tristan Jarry, Philip Gustafsson from Minnesota, Jeremy Swayman from Boston, Antti Ranta, Semyon Varlamov from the Islanders, the Corpedo, Yunus Korpisalo, and Ilya Samsonov from Toronto. Are those names that you would rather have as your starting goalie?
I would like Swayman. I feel like he's experienced.
Mhm.
He has that playoff experience behind him. He could be a mentor to Schmidt. I feel like. And,
Honestly,
but
comes to money.
a bigger question I think is does Boston hold on to Swayman, and do they get rid of Linus Ullmark?
yeah, because honestly,
Because
that's their
That's
that's their big part because they have to get rid of one or the other at this point. They can't
Yeah.
keep it. They can't keep going with their salary
Because
cap.
we have it in the doc that we have for our planning, but there have been rumors for a Linus Ullmark trade that's possible.
Mhm.
And one of the possible destinations is the New Jersey Devils. So, would you take from the 2 Boston goalies? Would you take either Swayman or Linus Ullmark? And I think I would like Ullmark more than I would like Swayman.
Would you prefer him to a Freddie Anderson or a Tristan Jarry or Jar Blocks, which is a great name for
Great
Tristan
names.
Jarry, and Philip Gustafsson, who won many a person their fantasy hockey league this year with a very hot streak for Minnesota. It's certainly a tough choice, especially with salary cap.
Personally, I
concerns.
think they're gonna keep Swayman. I think that Linus is gonna get paid a buttload of money by New Jersey or Edmonton, because Edmonton has been struggling for years with their goaltending. It's just been
That's
it's been bust after bust after bust with their goaltending.
that's
Look
been
at it as the defense.
that's been their one weakness. The Oilers.
Yep.
I mean,
Last year,
They probably reach the final at least if they get a good goaltender.
like last year, like they like Edmonton lost so many games off of just little muffin goals that could have been so easily prevented if they had a decent goaltender.
I think you
At
make
the
a
NHL
great
level.
you make a great point that the game in its current state is won on these razor thin margins. You look at Florida right now, and I know we'll get to the Eastern Conference Finals soon. They haven't won a regulation game before 2 nights ago. They hadn't won since Game 2 against the Leafs. So they played only overtime games.
Yeah.
Where you're talking about one bounce makes the difference between a team winning.
Yeah.
And the fact that they were able to get the positive end of that for 3 straight weeks. So 3 straight weeks of luck. It's almost impossible.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah.
And they are now 1 game away from sweeping the Hurricanes, a really good team.
Yeah.
Last of the Devils.
Well, speaking of Florida, I think we'd like to talk about that first round series as well with the President Trophy winners, the best regular season, and I stress regular season team in National Hockey League history, losing in the first round in 7 games to an 8 seed. The Boston Bruins, I think we have to say, we've said it before, but we have to say
What
it again.
happened?
What
What
happened,
happened?
Boston? I mean, it always happens in sports. You had the Patriots in 07, best regular season team, lost in the Super Bowl. You had the Warriors, lost in 2016 in the NBA Finals to LeBron.
The Falcons 28-3.
Don't bet on
Well,
regular
this
season
is about
teams.
the best regular
Regular
season
That's
teams.
fair.
MLB, Mariners lost in the division series back in 2001 when they had Ichiro going off in his rookie year.
The Colts
And now you have
lost.
Boston.
Yep, the Colts
Lost.
lost after a 14-0 start.
They can't, for some reason, it's always so good in the regular season, but the playoffs, it's a different atmosphere, and for some reason, those great regular season teams, they can't ever finish the job, it seems. And we just saw that about a month ago with the Boston
Which
Bruins.
also proves why they should keep swimming, because he had a phenomenal game in Game 7.
Yeah.
Elias Homer kind of
Yeah.
was a little iffy. It was his first 6.
Yeah.
Coming into the series, I saw Florida originally as the team to go out and Boston to move on.
Kind of sweet.
But once they started getting more and more as competitive with Boston, I started seeing them as a bit of a Cinderella story. And now that they beat Boston, they went on to beat the Maple Leafs, I believe. And now they're in the conference finals to have the chance to go to the finals and win the cup. I feel like this could be a Cinderella story for the century.
Or they could pull Philadelphia
Not really.
Phillies.
Not
where
for the
they
century.
do amazing in the first 2 rounds of the playoffs, and then choke a 2-1 lead in the series.
Yep.
If you talk President's Trophy, who won the President's Trophy last year?
Florida Panthers.
Florida
Mr.
Panthers.
Kirkman.
And they upgraded. I think they upgraded their team. They traded.
They
Uber-
definitely
Yeah.
They
did.
traded Huberto
Definitely.
and what's his name?
Mackenzie Weegar.
Uyghur, and they got back Kachuk, who, when that trade happened, a lot of people were talking about Calgary got the better end of that, especially because both teams went and signed their
right now.
guys.
Right
Right now, I'll go with Jonathan Huberdeau this past year. I drafted him in the first round of my fantasy team. He crushed me. He was like a third-line winger at the end of the year, playing 14 minutes a
Yeah, you're
game.
probably kicking yourself.
But Florida, I think, like they didn't. It took them a long time to gel, but they were a very good team.
And now that
They were much hotter at the end of the year than a lot of other teams were. And
That's fair. And they have a strong
Money
defense.
Montour is just as good a defenseman, if not better than Uyghur was.
If you can't tell, Mr. Kirkman and I love a good nickname for a hockey player.
Mhm.
But just to add to that, the Bruins, you struggle and play for that 135 points, and you put so much of your emotion into it. The season ends, and it can be a letdown. If you look at the President's Trophy winners, we haven't had a President's Trophy winner win the Stanley Cup since the lockout-shortened season of 2013 when the Blackhawks won both. For a full season, we haven't seen it since the 2008 Detroit Red Wings. And I know that the men in this room do not remember that, some of these guys here.
I was born
Yeah.
that year.
Yeah.
And just one more point. If you look at the Bruins roster, the number of changes made by the general manager to seemingly upgrade the team, sometimes that backfires. And we saw it with the Rangers. I think you play 75% of a season with a group of guys, and when you change it too much, you start to doubt who you have in the room. And Mr. Kirkby has won, baseball state championship games at very high level here in the state of New Jersey. You guys have played on teams through your lives so far where you get very close, and if you change something last minute, I think we saw that with the Rangers, and we certainly saw it with the Bruins.
Yeah. But I think that, well, the Panthers, their fan base is also really good, and it's definitely gotten a lot stronger, being that they're winning a lot more games, and now that they are farther and farther into the playoffs.
So here's a question for the hosts here. If I was giving you $150 for a brand new Florida Panthers jersey, would you be getting white, red, or light blue?
The light blue, all light. Those are so clean. Those are so clean.
Going back to F1 because I like to mention racing whenever I can. I'm a big Ferrari fan. You've seen me in a Ferrari sweatshirt, so I have to go with the red.
I'll go for red.
That's been my favorite color since I was a year old or less. So I got to go with the red. But the Panthers jerseys are incredible.
I agree.
Even the base white ones are solid.
Yeah,
Mhm.
I mean, they do their job so well. You can recognize immediately who that team is, and that's the job of a jersey. And if they can make it special and have good style on top of that, which is what they do, that just talking about goat jersey. How about that?
I think I'd have to go with the blue Panther jersey.
I feel like either the blue one or the vintage one with the full Panther jumping at you.
Oh, yeah,
I'm a
those are
big
nice.
fan of that logo.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
It
nice.
it reminds me of to go to like NFL. It reminds me of the Chicago Bears. They had such a nice logo,
And then they
Yeah.
screwed
and then
it
they messed it up and made it just
up. A
whatever,
letter C.
just the letter C.
Yeah.
But Florida, I feel like
It was always the C, but that was a pretty good alternate logo, but they
Yeah.
got rid of it for some reason.
I would
It was
have
always good.
gotten personally the navy blue ones if we're gonna go with the vintage ones. The navy blue.
And for you golf fans out there, Brooks Koepka was rocking his
yeah.
Ryan Lomberg jersey
Yep.
at the game.
He
He's
was
a
going
huge Florida Panthers jersey.
And Koepka will move over to golf, I guess, for a moment here
Oh,
on that because we did have the PGA Championship this weekend,
Yeah, and he
and
did.
Brooks Koepka did very well, I
Yeah.
believe.
Yeah,
I only saw a few
Won the
alerts
whole
from
thing.
ESPN.
Yeah, he won the whole
He
thing.
won
And I think
Scotty and Scheffler and Hovland.
Yeah,
finished
Scheffler
second.
Scheffler finished
Hovland.
second, I believe. Who, by the way, is a North Jersey boy around here.
Yeah, Scheffler I think was like Ridgewood or something.
I
Or,
think
somewhere
Montvale.
around here.
Montvale.
It was one of these teams.
Wow.
He
Yeah,
lived in
Montvale.
I did
Montvale.
not know
I-
that.
It was
but he-
Montvale, yeah.
Montvale when he was younger,
Yeah,
and then
Then moved
moved
to
to
Texas.
Texas.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Which I remember that from last year with the Masters and his
Yeah.
win there, and it was big hoopla because kid from around where we live
Yeah.
won the biggest golf tournament in the world.
But yeah, he won.
Was he at the Heat game too?
Yeah, I think he was.
I know he's a big Panthers fan. But
So he probably went there, but
He probably won.
Just made
Who
just
knows?
won $3.5
Yeah.
million. He's got a lot of money. He
Yeah.
can spend
He's
wherever
just
he
having
wants.
fun.
Yeah.
I think.
Although
I
actually,
think
live
he won-
golf, that's probably nothing.
Mm.
Yeah, I think he won like by 2 strokes. I think he had -9 towards the
Yeah,
end.
he was 9, and I think Scheffler and Hovland were both 7.
Yeah, I think it was 2 strokes. And how about Michael Block, by the way?
Yeah,
was just gonna
say that.
that whole,
Yeah.
the whole
I go up to check, and the first thing that comes up, Michael Block, which shows you how big that story is.
He's
They
got-
don't
yes.
they don't
He
even
got
care
the,
about the
uh,
winner. They just care about
$3,000
the club pro
Yeah, he won
who
$3,000
finished
in the
6th,
first-
was it, or 5th?
something like that. But he
Yeah.
won $3,000 the first 6 months. And now
15th,
he won $250,000 or something like that. In
But he got
one weekend.
the exemption into this week's, and then he's invited back automatically next year to the PGA Championship again. So
Yeah.
yeah, I mean there was a whole thing with, was it Max Homa I think was talking about it, that like he can't believe that this guy has a job and then goes out and plays golf when these guys that he's competing with, their only job is to play golf.
The club pro, he did finish 15th, 1 over par.
At the
Or
hole
actually,
in one?
yeah, 1 over par.
Not bad.
Which
pretty good.
incredible for a club pro, as you said, who
Yeah.
works a day job
Works
And then
9 to
just
5
plays-
goes and plays.
and
yeah.
then just plays on the weekends or whenever
Yeah.
he
Must have
can.
been a quite
Can't
a
argue
good
that.
day on that Monday.
Yeah.
Going to work if he did.
Yeah. Let's steer it back over to the NHL because we want to get to some off-season moves, and I guess the big one
Definitely.
that we'll talk about is with the New York Rangers firing or
Yeah.
letting go of
Yeah.
Gerard Gallant.
They said
The
that,
the official language is they mutually parted ways. Make of that what you will. But who is the big guy for the Rangers now moving forward? There's rumors that say Peter Laviolette, Mike Babcock, Jay Leach, Bruce Boudreau, all candidates, among others. I'll start with you, Mr. Camato. You're a big Rangers fan. Who do you think the Rangers' big guy behind the bench is going forward?
Well, I think you will hear me vomit you'll hear it from across the state of New Jersey if I hear that Mike Babcock has been hired. An old school, brutish, angry coach. I don't think that fits with the current youth movement in the NHL. I'm pretty intrigued by Jay Leach. I think Jay Leach is the assistant coach of the Kraken. He's won AHL championships, coached on the Bruins staff before, and I think he's a very good X's and O's guy. Chris Knobloch is the current coach of the Hartford Wolfpack, so he's very familiar with the New York Rangers organization and the players that have moved up. He's another really good guy for the room where a lot of the players have great respect and deference towards him. Additionally, the other side of that is a guy like Peter Laviolette, who took the Islanders' job in 2001, immediately made it to the playoffs. Took the Hurricanes' job in 2005, 2006, immediately won the Stanley Cup. Took the Philadelphia Flyers to the Stanley Cup final. Took the Nashville Predators to the Stanley Cup final. And while you'd love to find the next Jared Bednar like Colorado, you'd love to find the next Rod Brind'Amour like Carolina, you might want to take the easy route and go with what you know.
Yeah, definitely.
And
Especially with the young guys, you don't want to
you gotta
take a flyer and blow a couple years of.
Mm-hmm. You got.
development down.
I mean, Lafreniere, the first overall pick. What is it now? 3-4 years ago.
Three. Right?
2019, I think.
To sound like my Gen Z student colleagues here, I would say he's on the border of being labeled as trash.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I already pretty much labeled him as bust. I actually have in my notes saying that I think we should re-sign Laffy for at least another year, or even 2. Develop him a little bit, trade him.
Yeah.
Just get rid of him.
Yeah, he hasn't panned out.
No, he was projected to have 30 plus goals his first season.
No, not happening. He's languishing on that fourth line, and I'm still surprised that he's on the power play unit because he's on that second power play.
He's on the second.
Yeah.
There's no room.
It's atrocious.
Yeah.
I feel like if one of those guys get hired, it's going to be hard to make the playoffs, especially in your conference, because you've got so many competitive teams. Look at your own division. You have the Devils and the Hurricanes both fighting for first place.
Mm-hmm.
And the Hurricanes, I believe, won by 1 point. So, and the Rangers were still down by
1 point over the Devils, and I think 3 or 4 over the Rangers.
Yes, the Rangers.
112. The Devils had 111, and the Rangers had like 107.
I think that's a great point, Mikey, and I'll pose the question to the group here. If you're looking at the teams, the Devils made such an incredible move this year, going to near the top of the division with a great playoff run. There are 3 teams poised to make a similar jump next year, and that would be the Ottawa Senators, the Detroit Red Wings, and missing one more Eastern Conference. Who was the other?
Would you say the Islanders, possibly?
The Buffalo Sabres. So those are the three
Buffalo's
young teams.
going to be really
I'll
good next
ask
year.
Mr. Kirkby first, and then let you guys chime in. Mr. Kirkby, if you were going to predict which team would make a Devils-like jump, which of those 3 teams, Buffalo, Detroit, or Ottawa?
That's interesting. I think if Buffalo could ever figure out how to play defense, and I think my bet would be with them because of the fact that they're just all so young, and they got another like Alex Tuck is a great veteran, presence there that will help them. I think that Owen Power's young. He was a rookie last year. Darlene got better last year. I can never pronounce the goalie's name, the young kid. With all the A's.
Pekka Luukkonen.
Yeah. So I think if he could develop, they could be a team that could do the same thing because they can go out and score 4 goals a game. If they could find a way to play a little defense. I do like Ottawa also. Detroit, I think more just because Field likes them so much. I don't know how good they'll be.
Mr. Field does love the Red Wings.
I don't think Detroit. I say it has to be either Buffalo or Ottawa.
Definitely.
This coming from a guy who has not seen the Detroit Red Wings play in about 5 years, though.
Yeah.
Don't quote me on this.
Okay.
Don't quote me on anything.
Another thing is that
my big one is Ottawa, I think. Because they have very good young. I feel like they're kind of going to be like the Devils are this year. They have.
maybe.
It's kind of the same
I can
situation
see
out
it.
there. Devils were trash last year in the basement of the Metropolitan Division, in the basement of the Eastern Conference. Now they made it to the second round of the playoffs and beat their biggest rivals. Ottawa is in the same situation this year, but next year. We'll just have to find out,
Yeah.
and I think they're going to do it.
And speaking of Detroit, I think that letting Andrew Kopp go at the beginning of the season to Detroit was the worst move that the Rangers could have made starting the season off. He was so explosive last year during the playoffs, and you just let him go to Detroit out of all teams. Like a basement team, and who could possibly become a very good team next year, but like it's just ridiculous.
And I don't want to skip over you guys here, but I found a great segue. Speaking of organizational ineptitude and the New York Rangers, how about Patrick Kane?
Yeah.
What a great signing for you guys.
Great.
5 goals,
Yeah.
7 assists, 12 points in his 20 games with the Rangers
Yeah.
in the regular season. I can't
Well,
pull
the,
up the
the
playoff
Rangers, they have a.
Chicago's worst move.
stats. And you guys needed a defenseman, and you went out and got
Kane and Tarasenko.
yeah.
Well, Tarasenko was a good move. I like that move.
Yeah, I
When
really
playing,
like
Tarasenko, I agree with. I'll
You
come.
can give
I'll
up
come.
on
I
up
was
with
not
that.
very happy. I was
Kane?
happy at first with Kane.
Mhm.
It's just
I mean,
Yeah.
you were very happy
He
with
did not
Kane,
show up.
but it was not the right decision. I
he did
think.
not show up.
And then Kane decided to skip the season, and yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's
Pretty much
important.
just not show up.
It's important to note that Kane was injured, and I think that was a red flag going into the trade deadline. I think Drury has a lot of flaws, but I think this one might have come down from above, where James Dolan, the owner of the Rangers, kind of demanded that a trade like this happen. And it goes back to what I said, that they mixed up the lineup a little too much, and it mixed up the room, and they put in the wrong pieces, whereas
Yeah.
last year,
Yeah.
putting in Andrew Kopp and putting in Frank Vetrano were the right moves. I think that Patrick Kane was a little bit of a difficult move to make, and it was nice to see him in a Ranger jersey, but it was not a good fit to beat the Devils. Could the Rangers have beaten the Hurricanes? Yes,
Yeah.
but I don't think it was a good fit.
Because the Rangers, they also have a huge move this offseason. They're either, well, first they have to get contracts with Lafreniere and Miller, but they're also going to have to decide whether they're going to keep Kane or Tarasenko. Which one do you want?
I actually have that on my notes. I'm saying re-sign Tarasenko ASAP. Let Kane go. His contract is way too big. And definitely get more defensive depth.
Yeah.
You're comparing a lot of these teams to the Devils. I feel like the biggest reason why they went from a basement team to being one of the top teams is Lindy Ruff. I gotta give it to him. He really did change his team around, I feel like.
Last year we were chanting to fire him. This year we were chanting sorry.
Yeah. But it's what you do in the offseason. You, as a head coach, you're gonna be criticized for what you do, but you just gotta overcome that and find ways to win games. And Lindy Ruff found a way to do that, and now look what he did. He beat the Rangers, he got to the second round of the playoffs, and he just got Timo Meyer, who was insane. In however many games
Well,
he
for
played,
the regular season.
You guys also got Andre Palat, too.
Andre Palat
Yeah,
too.
I think getting Marino was the key.
Yeah.
Marino
Yeah,
was
definitely.
an absolute stalwart on
I mean,
defense.
he was kind
He
of
made
rolling
some
himself.
At
Yeah.
$4.4 million.
40, exactly.
An
That was
incredible-
insane.
incredible
Steal.
steal.
Yeah,
An
he was-
incredible
yeah.
steal.
He was kind of like a second goalie. I mean, the shots he was
A lot of
blocking,
block shots.
Yeah.
he
Just
blocked
good.
them, but it was
Never
in
out of
his leg.
position.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's something about the Devils' defense, I think. I mean, like Jonas Siegenthaler, you won't get taken in any fantasy leagues, but the guy's just solid. Like he does,
Yeah.
he's pretty solid. Dougie Hamilton's a decent defenseman, obviously better offensive guy probably, but
Yeah.
they got to figure out. I mean, Graves, I like Graves.
Yeah, I really like
I
Brian
think he's the
Graves.
guy they got to re-sign. You re-sign him, you bring back, not bring back, but you bring up Luke Hughes now, and all of a sudden,
Yeah.
in my opinion, Severson goes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
$5.6 million hit. I think
Yeah.
that he's got to be the casualty of the cap this year.
Yeah.
You don't need him on a power play.
Every,
He's on
every
Hughes,
playoff
second
team
power
has
play.
a tax to pay,
Yep.
and that's probably the tax for the Devils this year, getting rid of Severson. We've got one more thing to talk about before we get to the conference finals, and we're running out of time, so I'm going to turn it over to Sean, who has some big news about NHL action that is coming.
So
to
it was announced last night. Next year in February 2024, MetLife will be hosting 2 Stadium Series games, back-to-back games in February. Devils versus Flyers, Rangers versus Islanders.
Now, The big thing that we're all sad about is that it isn't Devils Rangers.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
happening there, which-
That would have been
that
such a
would have
good
been the
rematch.
right move for the
Mhm.
National Hockey League, but I guess you can't argue with Gary Bettman, and of course you had to
That's
have
fair.
the Flyers come in with.
Yeah.
I mean, Sam, you're an Eagles fan, but you're a Rangers fan. There's a lot of Philadelphia fans who are up here, and there's a lot of Philadelphia fans from down south in Jersey
Yeah.
who can make
Yeah.
their way up to MetLife to watch that game. I hoped it would have been Islanders versus Flyers
Yeah.
because that would have I feel like kind of rekindled the old 70s and 80s rivalry that they had when
Definitely.
the Islanders did the four-peat and the Flyers the Broad Street Bullies back then. I think that would have been the right move, and then of course having Rangers Devils, that script pretty much just writes itself.
Now you gotta
Yeah.
wonder what jerseys are gonna look like. I mean, I think
Yeah.
the Devils. I think the Devils are gonna go with the
black
red
one.
and green.
No,
Red and
the
green.
red and green. I think I always like the green ones, the old like
Yeah.
80s ones.
I'm a
'Cause
big fan of
if
black
you
ones.
if you don't
Yeah.
remember, of course we weren't born then, but they had green in the logo.
One thing, just getting the jerseys. When I was a kid growing up, one of the coolest things I thought was when you'd go to games, and the home team always wore white, and the road team always wore the dark jerseys.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like I loved, for some reason, don't ask me why, I always loved the LA Kings black jerseys that they had, those old ones.
Gretzky.
Purple
Gretzky
ones were
jersey.
so
But
good.
then
Yeah.
when they
The purple with the-
switched, and now the home
Yeah.
team usually wears the dark, and the road team
Yeah.
wears the white, it's kind of like,
Eh,
Well, remember that was a
Yeah.
switch for when you were a kid. It was never like that in the 50s, 60s, and 70s.
Yeah.
Because the Broadway blue shirts were, of course, wearing blue at home.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was switched at, I think, late 70s.
Yep.
Yeah.
to me, it's like that was cool. Like
Yeah.
you saw
yeah.
all different
Yeah,
jerseys.
because you
all
saw the
time.
other jerseys coming in.
Yeah.
We're kind of running out of time, so let's talk just for about a minute about the conference finals. Of course, not very exciting. We got two sweeps on our
Yeah.
hands. 3-0 Florida over Carolina. Game 4 is tonight, and last night Vegas won 4-0 over Dallas. They lead that series 3-0 with the Game 4 coming tomorrow night. I think we're seeing Florida Vegas in the final, which is what I
Definitely.
predicted, if you
Yep.
remember. Or I think I predicted Vegas Kraken, but whatever.
Close.
No, wait.
Close enough.
You
yeah.
couldn't even do Vegas Kraken.
No,
No,
you
we'll
go
go
through
for
the-
Oh,
Florida.
sorry, Florida Kraken.
Florida.
That was my bad. I thought it was going to be like 2018 with the expansion team coming in, and then Florida kind of like the Capitals that year. But what do you guys think of this conference finals that we've got right now?
You know, I want to say all kinds of crazy things and interesting insight, but there's not much to say. Bobrovsky is the story, period, in the Eastern Conference. I mean,
Yeah.
Yeah.
no matter what Carolina does, and we've questioned their ability to score, they just can't get by Bobrovsky. Florida has 4 even-strength goals the last 10 games. That's it. They're not scoring like crazy either. They're only playing 1-goal games. It comes down to the goalie.
Yeah, absolutely. He's been stealing games, big saves, and for a guy who was benched middle of the season, and there's been all the talk the past couple of years about, God, what the hell's the guy's name? The other guy who was terrible.
In Florida,
Yeah,
Spencer Knight.
Spencer Knight. He was supposed to take the job this year and go with it, and it's been Bobrovsky the second half of the year, and I think he's been responsible partly for their run in the regular season to make the playoffs, and then stealing games in the playoffs.
It was definitely a big shocker for me to figure out that Florida only got 4 even strength goals this whole with the conference finals.
Well,
Or
I remember I remember you said earlier today that the Panthers hadn't had like a regular game win since like
Yeah.
2 weeks
Yeah.
ago.
Yeah.
Something.
Yeah.
The margins.
Crazy.
and they were when I look at highlights of the Panthers, they were scoring 7 points a game at the end of the season,
Yeah.
and then all of a sudden you're down to 4 even strength goals in however many
Well,
games.
they're also going against the best of the best teams this season.
You can compare Miami Heat, Florida Panthers, both
Yeah.
8 seeds, making a
Yeah.
spectacular run someone expected.
And
Definitely
I think,
Cinderella stories.
I think with that, it's time to end. We got a minute to go in our recording period here. Thank you so much to Mr. Kirkby and Mr. Camanto for joining us.
Yes.
Thanks to Michael McKay as well for joining us. For Sam Koppelman, Alex McKay, and Sean Barry, the normal host of the Pascack Clutch, this is Matthew Merlino, Mad Dog Matt, whatever you want to call me. So long. Thank you for joining us. We'll be back. We don't really know. We'll try and get one more before the school year ends in mid-June.